If you are thinking about getting into reloading, today I want to cover my top 5 reasons that people stop reloading, or likely never get started in the first place. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't good reasons to start reloading. Today, I want to cover the 5 things that are likely going to be your biggest obstacles when you start reloading. The first is cost. I think that so many people think they should start reloading solely because of cost. In fact, I polled my audience, and almost 20% of them answered that they started reloading based on cost. If your plan is to start reloading extremely hard to find calibers or extremely high cost per round calibers, you can get over this initial investment much faster. While it's true that the cost per round goes down for the average reloader, the overall amount of money spent tends not to. Most of the reloaders that I interact with tell me that they spend the same total amount or even more after they start reloading. The difference is the amount of rounds they went through usually increases. One of my favorite comments that I've received about this subject is that there are 2 types of people when it comes to reloading. Those that lie about the money they save and those that are going to. Often, when people are talking about how much money they save, they also neglect our next point: time. Time to reload is not insignificant, especially when you're starting out. If you're reloading on a single stage press, I've heard some people estimate around 50 completed rounds per hour. If you're reloading 9mm, by the time you subtract the cost of components, you likely aren't saving enough money to make up for a minimum wage job. If you start reloading on a progressive press, this can speed up the process, but it also is more complex and certainly a higher initial cost. You really don't want to be in a rush when you're reloading, especially when you're starting out. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the reloading hobby. But if your time is limited, you may want to think twice about getting started. But if you've got endless amounts of free time, this may not be a concern for you either. Some people even end up running multiple presses simply because they don't like to spend the time to change calibers. Which brings us to our next reason: space. The amount of space you need to reload your own ammo is highly variable, but some space is going to be needed. The more calibers you reload for, the more space you're going to need. Having a relatively cool, dry place to store our components is going to be needed if we want them to last. I know some people that have a really cool setup just in their closet, but I've never lived in a house that had an empty closet available either. Now, some people strap a 2x4 to their kitchen table and they can start reloading, but setting up and taking down your setup was going to add to the previous item as well: time. I have a dedicated area for my reloading, and often I wish I had even more space when I'm working on larger lots. Space is always going to be a factor. How you want to reload is up to you, but I suggest one thing you consider is how much space you're going to need to be able to do it effectively. The number 4 item is dealing with tedious or repetitive work. Reloading ammo is not complicated. You only need 4 different ingredients. However, careful of inspection for defects, ensuring that the proper amount of powder is in every case are very important steps to make sure your reloads are safe. Some people find this type of work relaxing and enjoyable, while others don't have the attention span to stick with it. If you're ready to dive in, make sure you're aware of the time that it takes and that you're going to be able to give it the attention that it needs to be done safely. The 5th obstacle that stops people from reloading or keeps them from starting in the first place is being able to find the components that they need to reload. Often, the times of low component availability is when people want to dive into reloading, all to find out that one of the 4 components is not readily available. Keeping an appropriate stock of components on hand can be a challenge, but the last thing people want to do is spend $1,000 on a setup and then they can't load anything because the powder or primers that they need can't be found at a reasonable price. Managing proper component supply is going to vary depending on your usage, but it seems to never hurt that when you do find your components that you need, that you make sure you have enough to last you for a little longer than you might think. Now that you know the 5 biggest obstacles to starting reloading, check out this video here where I cover 5 common beginner mistakes for new reloaders. I'll see you in my next video, and until then, stay safe in small groups.